Hello my friend, good evening and enjoy your viewing. Today we are going to learn tactics on the boss Lady Deathwhisper in Icecrown Citadel. Lady Deathwhisper is the second boss of the Icecrown Citadel raid, yet one of the most difficult battles on this raid in heroic difficulty. It's an intense two-phase encounter involving lots of mechanics, dangerous AoE abilities to navigate, and waves of additional enemies to keep under control throughout the fight. DPS tip: be mindful of threat when AoEing. Watch the dominant mind cooldown and stop AoEing briefly to avoid killing your friends. Use the entire area and spread out to prevent splash damage on our nearby players. Healer tips: utilize raid defensive cooldowns to mitigate predictable AoE damage. Dispelling and decursing are your top priority. Tank tips: always be mindful of Cult Fanatic, as they will often get buffed by Dark Transformation, as this significantly increases their damage output, but slows their movement speed by 50%, allowing you to kite them instead. Use all possible offensive cooldowns as often and early as possible against Lady Deathwhisper herself to build as much threat as you can. Evenly spread and maintain threat on all targets you are tanking. Strategy for Lady Deathwhisper. Phase 1. Start off by having the raid run in together. Having healers and ranged DPS stack up behind Lady Deathwhisper to force the odds to funnel in together towards the boss. Have hunters drop slowing traps on either side, to give your tanks additional time to grab all of the odds. There are 7 odds total, 3 on both sides and 1 in the entrance of the room. The goal to clump everything together on top of Lady Deathwhisper and AoE it all down. Tanks must be mindful of the shadow cleave and keep the mobs facing away from the raid. The odds are the main focus on the fight. Be sure to allow your tanks time to gather and position them before starting AoE. The Cult Fanatics are by far the most deadly odd in the fight. Tanks will need to keep this phase away from the raid at all times, as they have a powerful shadow cleave. They will frequently use Necrotic Strike on the tank, which absorbs 20,000 incoming healing. Healers must quickly overheal the tank with this debuff to remove it and top them. Finally, at 25% health, the Fanatics will gain Vampiric Might, increasing their damage dealt and healing for 300% of all damage dealt. This should be dispelled as soon as possible, ideally by a mage with Spell Steal. Cult adherents must be interrupted at all times, as they cast multiple spells that will likely cause a death if not kicked. Frequently, they will also apply Curse of Torpor on a random player. This must be decursed as soon as possible, as this will add a 15-second cooldown to all spells, drastically limiting what you can do. Lastly, they will periodically gain Shroud of the Occult, making them immune to interrupts and reflecting all spell back to the caster. Physical DPS will need to quickly burn this shield down and interrupt, and your tank will likely want to use a minor cooldown if these odds start casting while this shield is up. Tanks must always be aware of any Fanatics gaining Dark Transformation, as this will make them extremely deadly, likely killing your tank in 1 or 2 attacks only. This buff, however, slows their movement speed down by 50%, allowing the tank to kite them around instead of simply face tanking them. DPS need to be aware of any reanimated Fanatics or reanimated adherents that Lady Deathwhisper reviews, as the Fanatics are now immune to all physical damage and the adherents are now immune to magical damage. DPS need to quickly swap to whichever end they are able to damage and kill them quickly. Phase 2. Phase 2 begins once Lady Deathwhisper reaches 0 mana and her mana barrier break. You will want to stop DPS when she is very low on mana. Quickly clean up any adds still alive or deal with a new wave about to spawn, then burn the last bit of her mana to transition into the next phase. The start of phase 2 is the most ideal timing to use all offensive cooldowns and burn the boss as much as possible. Lady Deathwhisper has a traditional threat table in phase 2 and requires the tanks to generate as much threat as possible. 2 tanks should be assigned to Lady Deathwhisper herself and aim to deal the highest amount of threat per second possible. She will very frequently apply Torch of Insignificance to her current target, quickly stacking up to 100% threat generation. The largest threat in this phase are the Vengeful Shades that Lady Deathwhisper will frequently spawn in. This will spawn in near 3 random players and slowly move towards them. If they reach their target, they will explode, dealing 23,160 to 24,840 Shadow Frost damage to all nearby enemies. This will essentially be a wipe if it ever goes off, and needs to be the #1 priority for the entire raid to look for. In addition, she will also continue to use both Dominate Might and Death and Decay in this phase. Heroic difference. Lady Deathwhisper is immune to taunt on heroic difficulty. The two tanks must maintain a threat lead over the DPS and continually leapfrog each other on aggro, taking turns gaining and losing stacks. It is vital that you wait for your stacks to fall off before ranging aggro again, or she will simply refresh them right away. The two tanks will need to continually alternate between being first and second on threat here. In addition to this, adds will continually spawn in during phase 2 on heroic mode. These are easiest to handle by having a third tank available to manage the adds while the other two tanks fight for treat on Lady Deathwhisper herself. In the video you can see killing the lady on the verge of the wipe. Don't judge strictly, it was one of my first attempts to this boss. If you do everything right, you can do it too. Try it and good luck.